Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for tonight's edition of HR Mentorship Learning Series. My name is Oluyemi Adeosun, and this evening we'll be looking at the topic how to develop a learning and development plan for an organization. And our facilitator for tonight is Olama Ijeoma, and she is a dynamic human resource professional. She has over a decade of diverse experience spanning several sectors, including FMCG, telecommunications, and consulting. She's currently the head of learning and talent development at Spar Nigeria, a favorite store. She's at the forefront of nurturing organizational growth and empowering teams to reach their full potential. Olama's expertise encompasses strategic HR planning, talent development and management, operations optimization, career advisory, and mentorship. Her multifaceted background has also equipped her with a unique perspective on workforce development and organizational success. Furthermore, Olama's passion for education extends beyond her professional role as she dedicates to guiding young professionals in aligning their career paths with their aspirations and potential. She has a first degree in English language from the First and Best University of Ibadan. She also has a master's in business administration from the Rome Business School with specialization in international human resource management. In addition to this, she has done several courses around topics not limited to compensation and benefits, data analysis, digital marketing, and strategic HR business partnership, among others. Ladies and gentlemen, she is happily married with 2 children, and outside her career, she is a great singer. Hopefully, she gets to sing at some point. She loves poetry and she enjoys networking. Ladies and gentlemen, speaking to us again on the topic how to develop learning and development plan for an organization. Please let's welcome Olama Ijeoma. You have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adeosun. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your humble introduction. I believe you all can hear me. Please confirm if you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, we can.
All right, sir. We appreciate all you do, sir, for the HR community. We see you, we see the impact you're making, and we are super grateful. And for everyone who has joined the session this evening, thank you for being here out of your restful weekend. You decided to come and join on this learning series for February. We appreciate your time and happy new month to everyone. So you can drop in the chat room where you're joining in from, your name and where you're joining in from quickly. I would like to say that I don't know it 100%. This session is for us to share value. So feel free to put down your inputs and whatever it is you have in terms of your suggestions and of course your questions, which we'll take at the end of the presentation. This is going to be a 1-hour presentation, and we'll wrap it up while we prepare to take questions as well. All right, so the topic again, how to develop a learning and development plan for an organization. We'll be looking at the objectives around, and we'll be answering questions around the what, why, who, how, as well as addressing the limitations, stroke the challenges. Then we'll go ahead to conclude. So first of all, I would like to say that when it comes to learning and development, it's one aspect of the HR value chain that a lot of HR generalists and HR managers have has kept behind the scene, if that's the right way to put it, because it looks like besides when recruitment, which we put at the forefront, compensation and benefits, performance management, HR operation and administration, it is after we have handled all that bit, then we look towards the aspect of learning and development. And many a times, the way we address it is only through crafting out a training calendar. That's how we understand it to a large extent. But I'm here to let us know that learning and development is gradually taking the front role in organizations at large, so not just in the local space, even globally, because like I mentioned in the introduction, it's steadily gaining prominence because continuous learning is playing a vital role in the growth and development, both for individuals and the organization at large. So I want HR generalists to open up your mind, have a broader mindset as to how we approach L&D in our organization. That way, it's going to enable us know the critical points for which we require learning intervention and not just thinking it as a one-off activity. So it's on that note, I came up with this misconception, which I take very personally. I mean, if we have a different opinion, we can drop it in the chat on the fact that learning and development doesn't necessarily equate training activity. So that's why I put it out here that it's a misconception a lot of us have within the HR space. Because when you are approaching L&D, people look at it from just that very tiny bit of training. And I was very conscious when I mentioned training activities, because permit me to make reference to the part of the scripture that says, train up a child in the way he or she should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. Now, that training that was made reference to there was a training as a concept, not as an activity. While we'll understand the in-depth of training as a concept, many a times we address L&D from the angle of training being an activity. So that's why I made mention of the fact here that it's always seen as it's a misconstrued way of addressing L&D, because even for the recruitment officers, when it comes to wanting to recruit for learning and development officers, the first thing that comes to their mind is training, right? And it even shows when you put out job ads, in the job description, the job requirements, and the responsibilities. Many a times what we see there is, be able to execute training, be able to evaluate training. It's all training, 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 training. But the truth of the matter is that L&D is a more strategic role other than an activity, a one-time intervention activity. So I want us to bring that forward and have a mind change or open up our mindset when we're thinking through of what L&D is. Now, so organizational learning and development. So I carved out this title from a particular learning and development community that addresses L&D as organization-wide. And that's because it goes beyond the individual to the community and at large, the organization, both locally and globally. And one thing I also want to say is that don't expect me to share any template with us here regarding an approach to learning and development. What we have basically, and as much as HR is concerned with all the entire 360 HR value chain, is mostly principles, right? Once we understand the principles, it's easy for us to go and implement those principles. So it's never a copy and paste approach. That's basically what I'm trying to say. So at a webinar one time I attended, at the panelist session, it was also described that if for any reason you have to copy, ensure that you're pasting special. So it's not always the same for every organization. It's never the same approach you would use. While, again, the principle may be the same, the intervention and the strategy for which you apply those principles may differ. So just take it to heart that what we're going to be sharing here this evening are the basic principles as to how learning and development should work. So in definition of organization L&D, we could see here clearly that is the systematic process of enhancing the skills, knowledge, and competencies of employees, of individuals to improve organizational performance, where you have designing of training, and implementation programs. And those training programs, like I mentioned, is not just one-off training. They could include things like workshops, mentoring programs, mentorship, other learning initiatives that would help foster the growth, innovation, and adaptability within an organization. Why we have not been able to get a lot of business leaders to key into learning and development initiative, it's in most of the time is in our presentation. We see L&D as one of those roles where you are just ticking the box, right? And it happens a lot because when you're starting out a new year, we are working with, okay, I've designed my training calendar for 2025, for instance. I have made my budget and all. But have you ideally gone all the way to ensure that you are tying what it is you intend to do in learning and development to the organizational growth and development? That's why we have a lot of business leaders who are not keen into the strategy of learning and development. Right. So again, the question we're asking ourselves this evening on why organizational learning and development is for us to know that L&D is not a stand-alone function, right? It's an integral part in the business where it drives organizational success, ensuring that the key process will then help employees to have the required skill and knowledge to achieve the organizational goal. So this is where the vision of learning and development is shared. And it's important that we carry that vision consciously. That's the only way we can drive it down. And what is the vision of L&D? It's a strategic approach. It's a strategic intervention. It's a strategic initiative whereby you would find learning and development in every other aspect of the HR value chain eventually, because from the recruitment and selection, there is a bit of learning and development there, where you are ensuring that whosoever is the candidate you are bringing into your organization, you are to ensure that you manage that talent effectively. And how do you do that? Whatever it is you'd have had in the conversation with that new hire on during the recruitment stage, you are to ensure that there is no gap between what they said is a typical, it could be a typical case of what I ordered versus what I got. So it's important for you to close that gap. And in closing that gap, that's where you have an L&D intervention. So what we do in my organization is that we have a summary document that we use to have either supervisors, line managers, or heads of departments sign off after the orientation and the onboarding stage is ongoing for new hires. In that form, there is a column that says, what are the additional trainings besides your onboarding program, besides everything you have prepared? What are the additional training gaps you identified for this new hire? There is a strong possibility that the person may be lacking in some aspects. So while you feel that in there, that's can be captured as a learning and development intervention. That's very important. That is way, 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 way beyond before you even start talking about your KPIs as well as your performance management system. Before you get to that part, which most organizations do biannually or yearly, it's important that you start addressing it from the onset. So I'm just highlighting the fact that learning and development do not have its flow as a standalone function. So we see here under the mapping that one importance of L&D in understanding the vision is it strengthens the connection between learning and accomplishments. Strengthens the connection between learning and accomplishment. It enhances that the learner's experience by engaging them. It's effective management and strategic planning. That's one vision for L&D. It reduces the time to get competent people. So just like I mentioned earlier, right? In as much as you know who you're hiring, you would have done your top-notch interview, you would have hired seemingly top talents, but there would definitely, we're human beings, right? And while we are in the fast-paced world, there's a lot of technological change that is happening presently with so much. So there'll always be need for us to feel you improve through technology a number of things which has been there prior to now, and they are becoming outdated. So you reduce the time for that person to become competent, and of course, build and nurture capable talent. That talks about our competency framework and all of that mapping. We will see that as we go on in the slide. So yeah, still under the organizational learning and development, I tried to put an alignment between what learning and development does in these different buckets, where we are certain that most organizations, if not all organizations, fall under. So you have the one bucket here, which is performance management. I mentioned that earlier. What you see at that beginning of that box is we have an initiative, which is a learning and development intervention, and the value it adds both to the organization and to the employee. So it's both ways. So L&D initiative could be to integrate developmental plans into performance review. I know a lot of us HR professionals are already doing this, because under the performance management system, there will definitely be a part for learning and development, where the supervisor is suggesting what additional trainings would the employee require, even where there's a bit where the employee also feels an additional training he or she would require in their role. And for those of us that use the balanced scorecard approach, it's a lot simpler, where you have the learning and growth as one of the criteria for measurements, the entire performance management appraisal cycle. All right, so the next one we have here is the financial planning and budgeting. An initiative could be the alignment of the strategic plan and the financial goals. This is one aspect that learning and development comes in. We see the value added as well is to stronger align the financials with the organization. So there's no reason, if your business leader is viewing some of all the strategies and intervention that would the learning and development team would approach towards the success of the organization, that they are going to turn down the initiative. So most of the challenges I believe we have been having as learning and development in our role is the approach. How are we approaching L&D in the different organizations we work with? How are we addressing, how are we putting it forward with our business leaders and the management? So the third one here is organizational planning, where we develop learning paths that aligns with long-term goals. Again, this speaks to succession planning, career development, your competency mapping, and all of that as well. So for the next bit, I tried to ensure that I covered organization-wise in all of these buckets. We have strategy development, we have business development, we also have compliance and risk. You can see the different initiatives for each of them, where L&D intervention come in, as well as the value to be added once this initiative has been addressed. Then this is what changes that are made at the end of the day within those organizations. And we also have, of course, talent acquisition and retention, where you ensure you develop a comprehensive onboarding program. I mentioned that for new hires. You also have the career development program, where you have clear pathways. So I am sure that these are some of the strategies we already have in our organization, but structuring it in a way that there is learning and development intervention in each of these buckets is something that we may not have been doing consciously, intentionally, or in a structured manner. Because for what we also do in my organization is our pay grade, pay structure, where you have who is aligned to what role, your level, and all of that. We try to match that with your level, and of course, what are the required trainings you will need to have for you to move to the next level? So for instance, if you're supposed to remain in a particular role between 0 to 2 years, for you to, when you're getting to the 3rd year, what are the learning intervention? What are the initiatives that are required of you or of the organization to you that would enable you move to the next level successfully? For a lot of training academies, for a lot of organizations that have training academies, they've been able to understand this approach and they are running with it effectively. All right, and so we have change management. This is one very dicey part of the organizational change and transformation where we run away from a lot. But there's a learning and development bit. When you're coming up with the project plan on change management, you ensure that you first of all train your leaders on how to communicate and manage the change, align the employees to the new organizational value and direction. So you see here that it's not a one-way street, right? L&D is not just for the employees at the lower level. Sometimes, while a lot of you will agree with me, that's the truth, but sometimes business leaders don't believe they need learning and development intervention. They don't believe that they themselves will need to be trained. They don't believe that they need to imbibe leadership skills. They don't believe that with a lot of initiatives, they also need to ensure that they have a proper culture fit, which is, you know, another bit altogether. So all these are inputs. So by the time we ensure that we coincide all of this and put them together, we will see that what we think L&D is versus what we should be doing as learning and development professionals, they are not fully and properly aligning. So that should enable us have a rethink, a different approach and a different strategy towards what we should be doing in L&D. All right, so and the next bit here would be who are the audience? Who is the audience? Many a times, because we think that the category of people we have in an organization, we know them, we try to design trainings that cuts across all levels. We try to design trainings that you're addressing one kind of, one bracket of employees. We do not understand so much that even within our organization, there are different generations of employees, right? We don't have to overflow that. For those of us who were on the call when we started out the year, we had the statistics and the analysis that was shared by Mr. Patrick on the HRO of 2025. And he said so much around the different generations, the Gen X, Gen Y, and of course the Gen Zs, right? So it's very, very important. The approaches for which you design learning intervention would determine who your employees are in the different organization. How would they prefer to learn? What is the best approach? A lot of people in this age and time don't want to sit in a 6 to 8 hour training. A lot of people get easily bored, especially if it's a classroom setting. So L&D professionals have them to come up with other strategies, other ways to make it very viable, very interesting, fun. You can do things like workshops, you know, and make it very engaging for the participants as well as the employees. So it's important to understand what are the categories. So for instance, now in your organization, what is the percentage of the Gen X versus Gen Y? All right, what is the percentage of the Gen X and Y versus the Gen Zs? These are things that we need to understand. And once we get that percentage and understand that bit, it will enable us to know how we design our learning intervention to suit them better, right? We will key into technology more when we're addressing that. That's not to say that a lot of millennials, for instance, who ideally would expect would be digital literate, would be technologically driven. They are not laid back. We have so many peculiar cases. Some millennials may have been in our organization for maybe 5, 10 years, as the case may be, and they have become so laid back in their role where they are not in touch with the reality. We have so many of them in the organization I work with presently. So that way, when you're trying to design a learning intervention that has to do with a lot of technology, where you expect them to go on their phones to learn, they become very resistant. We have a lot of that. But ideally, you expect the millennials. I mean, the millennials are not as old as the baby boomers. So you expect that they should be learning from the Gen Zs because they will have them in their corner, in their space, so to say. But many a times that's not the case. So it's important that we don't assume. The documents we would have put together from the job analysis, which ideally is required when we have recruited an employee and they have settled in, those documents, they would show clearly what are the competencies this person has, what are the expertise they exhibit, and how you are supposed to approach a learning intervention when you want them to participate. The next who here would be who are our subject matter experts. I once interviewed in an organization for an L&D manager some months back, where I was asking questions because I was confused about how the L&D department functioned. So I was asking who has been like the trainer, the facilitator and all. And they said it was just one person. I think at most 2 of them that have been training. And this is an organization that has, in Lagos, as at then, they had up to 25 outlets. And so I was a bit, I was dazzled. I was wondering, I said, how do you ensure effectiveness in this training? How are you able to measure that the training has impacted the employees when you have just one person? And that's not because that person is a subject matter expert. That person was just hired, so to say, as an L&D professional or whatever it was. So what this person was doing was learning the products, because most of the trainings was around products. This person's responsibility was to learn about those products, and it's more like a train the trainer approach, and so I found that a bit worrisome, because if you are not engaging with the subject matter experts, it's not going to be effective. There's no 2 ways about it. You will not be able to get an L&D intervention that would be effective. So in our organization, we have subject matter experts. So I'll tie these two participants together, both the subject matter experts and the stakeholders, right? The subject matter experts could be the stakeholders as well, because your training could be something around them. So for my organization, we do a lot of training around receiving process, for instance. We have people at the warehouse, we have people in the supply chain unit, we have people in the operations who have learned this over time and they have become experts in the knowledge of this. So those are the people I reach out to coordinate this training, to facilitate the training. I just do the coordinating. They are the ones that facilitate the training, come up with the presentation slides and all the processes around what is required for that training to be executed. So I just supervise, coordinate, and ensure it's done properly, arrange whatever the presentation slide is. Then we go ahead and organize the delivery of that training as well. So it's always very important for you to get an effective and efficient learning and development initiative done. Ensure that you engage the subject matter expert. It's not to be taken for granted. And subject matter experts are not always external. They're not always external. You can find them internally, because I know there will be questions in our minds to say, some of those subject matter experts, they are probably external facilitators and they may be a bit pricey or expensive. You could find subject matter experts within the organization, especially people who have grown through the rank, people who have spent some time in the organization. It could even be the heads of department that know the job and they understand the expectations and what is required. So you engage them effectively. Same with the stakeholders. Who are our stakeholders? Our stakeholders could be, like I mentioned, the heads of department within a particular unit. It could be the line manager. It could even be the business leaders, right? These are our major stakeholders that for every L&D approach, you have to sell it to them, right? You have to do a proper presentation, ensure that you get their buy-in. Because without proper buy-in of stakeholders, trust you me, you are not going to get a good learning and development intervention where the employees of that organization is going to be satisfied. You're going to drive productivity and ensure that there is success for whatever intervention it is you want them to gain. Then finally, who are the L&D experts? I take this bit very seriously because, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of times we as HR leaders do not understand the role of L&D experts. Most times when we are recruiting, what we try to recruit people for are training coordinators, but we call them L&D officers, we call them L&D managers, because when you look at their role, it's centered around training, training, training. Learning and development is a strategy. Learning and development should be addressed from the business point of view. So when we are seeking to recruit learning and development, whether it's an officer or a manager, we need to ensure that we are recruiting the right people for the role. Most times, the officers we recruit are just, you know, there could be HR officers who all we need them for is documentation. Most times when we are recruiting L&D officers, we just need them for documentation. So you don't call them L&D. You should call them training coordinators or HR officers like we do in some cases. So we need to be very intentional about our L&D experts. Because when we also do that, we're sending the wrong signal to the business leaders, because they would also, in that same way we have taken on that mindset, they will also follow through with that same understanding in what the role of an L&D expert or an L&D professional is. So, and I believe a lot of training around learning and development should happen. Thankfully, a lot of communities that have for L&D are beginning to be out there, unlike before that. We have HR communities all over the place, and people are not consciously talking about the expectations as for learning and development experts and learning and development professionals. So yes, under the implementation strategy, I was able to put this together from, from start to end on how we are expected, the framework around learning and development when you're building a learning and development plan for your organization. It starts primarily from the needs analysis. A lot of us here know and understand how you go about your needs analysis. It's naturally supposed to be a 360-degree approach. It shouldn't just be one-sided. It shouldn't just be one-off. While it's mandated for you to send out surveys to employees, do the same directly to their supervisors, their line managers, have focus groups, conversations. So in my organization, apart from supervisor, team leads, we also have what we call concept heads and before the heads of departments. So in getting needs analysis, I sit with the concept heads of different departments to be able to understand how the team is functioning and what it is they require as a learning intervention for them, their team members within a particular department. So while you have done that effectively, and it should be done frequently, right? You cannot use the needs analysis you derived from probably year 2023. You want to use it in 2025. I mean, it shouldn't be, because a lot would have happened between that 1 year gap or 1.5 year thereabout gap. And so much would have happened. There would have attrition would have taken place. People would have moved to higher roles. So much would have happened. So there's a need to understand the analysis of where people are at and what is required as a learning and development intervention for them. Then, having done that, you go ahead to prepare a business proposal. So I'll show us in one of the slides a sample of what a business proposal is like, one I created. Then, of course, additionally, you look at your succession planning versus your career mapping and development. So these are two documents framework that can be prepared side by side. Then, of course, your competency framework would be done before we go ahead and prepare our learning plan, right? This is what we call training calendar in most of our organization. That's the language we use. We call it training calendar, but it's actually a learning plan. And why it's a learning plan is because besides training, there could be additional initiatives that you could come up with. For instance, there could be on-the-job training, there could be coaching and mentoring, there could be knowledge sharing sessions. All of these are not exactly training activities, but they fall under learning and development initiative. If you discover that there's a gap in the relationship between a team member and their line manager, having a knowledge sharing session that can bridge that gap. That's just an example, because it's something we've done in the organization I work with as well. So yeah, so under that learning plan development, you can create your mentoring, ensure that embedded in it, you have your mentoring, coaching, and body programs, as well as the personal development programs. Truth be told, your organization cannot do everything for you regarding your learning, right? The individual and the employee themselves, they need to understand seriously that nobody would take your personal development seriously, as serious as you would. So as much as it is our role and HR and our responsibility to point these employees towards their growth and development by showing them an example with how we have structured that in our organization, it's very necessary for them to take their personal development seriously. And that's why for organizations who make it as an additional KPI during their performance appraisal planning, it helps a lot. And employees, when they see that it's a major criteria required for them to move on to the next level, taking their personal growth and development seriously, then they begin to imbibe it as a culture. All right, so yeah, so under the implementation strategy, this is a sample of what a business proposal look like. So in the business proposal, your executive summary should cover your vision and mission. Whatever it is that organization has, or every organization would have definitely a vision and a mission statement. You build your proposal around that, because this is the first level of presentation that is required to make to your business leaders while you have done your needs analysis, because all of those bits is going to be embedded into this proposal. You share your objectives as to why it's required for you to adopt a learning and development strategy and to have it at the forefront of the business goal. Here is what it looks like. So you now start seeing your proposed learning and development activity down to all of that. Then as well, you have your implementation plan, how you intend to roll it out. So this is something that with the year change, with the new financial year and the conversation when you have your town hall, when those conversations has happened, you could, all of this bit, they would change, of course, with time. It doesn't have to be the same. So that's why there's a need to evaluate it, and you go back to the drawing board to see what has worked, what hasn't worked, and what other strategy do we need to employ. Then, of course, under the breakdown, there will be need for you to put your budget of everything that is required for that intervention, as well as the section for approvals. All right. So then here we are for under limitations and challenges. Definitely, I won't even sit here and say to us that it's going to be a jolly good ride. I'll be lying to us. There will definitely be resistance. There will definitely be limitations. There will definitely be challenges. Everybody, every organization, every SME, every firm have different diverse challenges because, you know, their approaches, they differ as well. But one major thing that I have noticed are some of the limitations which I've captured here are the lack of leadership buy-in. All right, so where management do not support and prioritize L&D initiatives. So I mentioned that. So remember at the earlier stage of the presentation where I captured all the bits that had to do with the performance management, where I mentioned the value added as well as the L&D initiatives. Those are some of the, you know, approaches, what we can use to share with our business leaders that can enable them have an understanding, an in-depth understanding, and create a buy-in to a learning and development proposal. Insufficient budgets and resources. This one is always there, right? It's always the case issue. But again, ensuring that you maximize the use of the internal stakeholders as well as the subject matter experts can help a lot. I'm telling you this because it's something that's been practical for me. I know it works differently for several organizations. We've employed this strategy a lot and it has helped. Inability to invest in external training programs or certification. It's always the case, right? Many a times when they have looked at their financials and seen that, okay, we don't have so much, cut training budget, cut this part, cut this bit. Again, once you have ensured that the employees themselves understand the need for continuous learning, you're not going to have so much an issue. They will go all out. So I completed my master's program last year, November to be precise, last year. But within last year, I had made it as one of my goals for 2024. Besides the program I was running, every month, I attended a minimum of 2 trainings. Outside, it wasn't paid for by the organization. It was my personal fund. Every month, minimum paid, and there were some were free, some were paid for, but it was a target I had set for myself for the year 2024. I was very intentional about it. And by October of that year, I had successfully achieved that bit for the year. So but I have made learning a culture and I'm running with it because the more you learn, the more we know. We say that knowledge is power, right? So it's not something someone can take away from you. Those learning, those informations, everything that you have building yourself up to have inside of you, no one can take it away from you. The moment you leave that organization, all the training investments that has been given to you, it can't be taken away from you. So why don't you think that it's important for you to invest in yourself, in your personal development and growth? So, you know, I believe that once we adopt learning as a culture, we will not have so much challenges when we are faced with some of these limitations. Alignment of the business goals. So I mentioned that, so if you look at your business proposal, you must ensure that it aligns with the business strategy, which can change every year. The business strategy may not be the same. So ensure that you are sitting at the board meeting when those discussions are being had, so that accordingly, you can map out your learning intervention programs to suit whatever changes that has been made. Resistance to change. This one is I mean, is always there. And some of this resistance to change could be as a result of culture. Addressing the culture bit is something that we have overlooked so much that whether or not we believe it, whether or not we accept it, is real. In a lot of organizations, we have practical culture challenges, and that gives an experience to the new hire. And during the employee engagement, they are watching. So while this can affect the way and manner people view learning, it's also important that we do the best we can. I mean, especially the business leader. I don't know if there are so many business leaders on this call this evening, but it's important that we are intentional about the culture we're building within our organizations. It's becoming more spoken of in this age and time than it used to be before. And a lot of employees are running with that understanding. Once they perceive any small cultural misalignments, they will run. That's the truth, especially the Gen Zs of today. Then compliance and regulatory constraints. This is also a challenge because in my organization, because we're a group of companies, we also have the manufacturing arm. And in that manufacturing arm, there will always be need for the regulatory bodies to show up, and they are requesting for documents, you know, that shows you have done ABCD training, you have done XYZ training. And because they come more often, it's not a case where you would always have to do those trainings, you know, all the time within short bits. Sometimes you would have, and it will be required for you to have those employees recover if you are planning to do it on a quarterly basis or every 2 months or even once a month. It's not always feasible. That's the point I'm trying to make, because these regulatory bodies, a lot of times, they go through manufacturing industries, and these manufacturing guys, these people are people who are at the forefront of the business, right? And they are on the job. Most times they are working countlessly within a particular time to roll out products. If it's a production line, maybe it's a bakery, for instance, you don't expect that they would be readily available many a times for trainings to happen. So that's a limitation. But in a way, for us to address some of those limitations is to be proactive in our approach. Ensure that you have given them the required training for a longer period of time, so that when these bodies come and you show them the certificate, they are aware that this training has been done. And of course, ensure that you provide them with the necessary PPE required for them on their job. All right, so yeah, so and this is 2 write-ups that I was able to take out from LinkedIn of some L&D leaders and professionals. Andre here mentioned that learning and development professionals, and it's important for us to get bolder, and that he says, I believe we should be thinking like the head of organizational development. Why does this matter? Learning and development professionals mostly address short-term needs, management training, guiding people around a new ordering system, or helping with health and safety compliance. I just shared that. But L&D professionals shouldn't just be reacting to short-term requests. They should look at it at long-term. It would allow or enable them make business work. In my experience as an L&D leader and advising clients, the twist changed L&D from order takers to trusted learning advisors. Now we are leading organizational development and working on business challenges. We are taking a zoomed out approach of our organization without its global and local context, and seeing how learning ensures success rather than jumping to everlasting minute requests. This helps us to find more interesting and effective ideas. This is one feedback. And the second one was much more practical, where he said on a train yesterday, a fantastic meeting with the Do Think Do. I started thinking, I have worked in the workplace learning and development for almost 30 years. And what I can finally say confidently is that the role of L&D in organization has unquestionably evolved beyond that of traditional support function. This year, that's the year 2025, digital transformation, innovation, and rapid change are at the forefront of business strategy. But it's learning that has become the link points that drives success. So the organization that thrived in this new corporate world are those that recognize the importance of continuous learning and just as a tactical effort to ensure skills, but a strategic initiative that generates business growth and resilience. For L&D leaders, this shift presents a really powerful opportunity to position ourselves as key business partners, those who are not just supporting, but driving performance and capabilities that directly impact the bottom line. And I once read also on LinkedIn that where there was a debate about whether or not the name L&D should be changed to performance drivers. And so to that end, we come to the conclusion where I put up this caption to say that the future is learning isn't just about content, it's about connection. And the presentation, we would have seen that we were intentional about connecting L&D to the different aspects of both the business and the individual's growth and success. That would be all for this presentation.
Thank you so much, Olamma, for
We can go
yet
ahead and
another.
take our questions.
Thank you so much, Olamma, for yet another excellent presentation, delivery. That was beautiful. Well done, well done. Quickly, we already have a question in the chat box from my sister Ngozi, and Ngozi says, yeah, thank you for literally an holding session on L&D strategy and implementation. Then she goes ahead with her question. How soon should we evaluate the effectiveness of a training? In parentheses, if planned in the company's training calendar, then what should be done if the training objectives are not achieved after a thorough planned training? All right.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ngozi, for that question. So I'll start responding from the second part, right? When you say, if a training objective is not achieved after a thoroughly planned training, if you thoroughly planned the training and the objective was not achieved, then the needs wasn't properly captured. It's as simple as that. Because when I mentioned at the initial point on how we should see training, not just an activity, but as a concept, I was being very conscious of the in-depth understanding. How, when you say thoroughly planned training, was it a training activity that was planned or a learning intervention that involved so many other activities besides training itself? Was it a classroom training? So if you are saying that the objective wasn't met, then the needs analysis wasn't properly captured. That's what I would respond to that. And the question that you say, how soon should we evaluate the effectiveness of the training if planned? So when you say if effectiveness, this question, I'm trying to understand it a bit deeper. If the training has been planned through the company's training calendar, so we have been misaligning what we know as learning and development initiative versus training. If the training has been planned, if you remember the chart I showed us earlier, you would see that before you come to the training calendar, you must have undergone some certain categories. So I'll just quickly take us back to this bit. So yeah, so if you look at this implementation strategy, where you have, after the competency framework, where you have the learning plan development, that is actually what we call our training calendar. Now, before that, see all the other things that should have happened. We must ensure that these have been properly done before we get to the actual training itself or actual learning intervention itself. And to that end, whatever strategy you used is very important. So it will now determine how effective or how efficient your training is going to be at the end of the day. I don't know if I answered your question.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that response. Just checking any other question around this topic of discourse for today. If you also want to ask your question via voice, do well to raise your hands and we can unmute you. We can enable you ask your question directly. I think I see another relevant question here. How would you persuade an organization without an L&D program to invest in one? So you hold your thoughts. Ngozi, you can unmute and speak.
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you so much for this session. I picked a lot from it. So I asked that previous question. Usually when we have our ISO audits, the auditors will, because after every training, we have a training feedback form, right? They keep asking, so have you evaluated the effectiveness of the training? And then I should show evidence that this training has been evaluated and that the aim of the training has been achieved. And sometimes I'm a bit, I wouldn't know what to respond, right? Because I believe training is an ongoing process whereby after stage 1, you move to stage 2. But then they want to know, if you plan the training in the training calendar, then you should be able to evaluate after maybe 1 or 2 weeks or 1 month to be sure that the aim of the training has been achieved. How do I respond to such, or how do I now evaluate a training after a while to know if it's effective? That's that question.
All right. Okay. Can I respond to that?
Yes.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Thank you for bringing clarity to that question. So this is what I would also ask to know. What have been the evaluation strategy you use for your training? Because aside gathering feedback, which happens on the spot from the employees that have participated in the training, it's also necessary, right, within that same period to have like a feedback section with their direct reporting line, which is probably one step ahead of them. So if the training was held for team members within a department, get feedback from their line managers, right? Similarly, their supervisors, and of course, the heads of departments. Most of the feedbacks required for the trainings are not something that happens on the spot. They are as a result of several engagements, and those engagements shouldn't just be one-off. You could have design a template where you engage the line managers and supervisors, and you call it a monthly conversation format. And within that monthly conversation discussion, you take inputs. How are they performing on the job? Has there been any behavioral changes that you have seen for this employee versus how they were before the training happened? Remember, you should also required to do a pre-assessment before the training happens. So when you do pre and post, that's actually another form of evaluation. So when you gather this document, as well as getting feedbacks from their line managers and supervisors, it's enough evidence for you to show, oh, this is what we have seen. And of course, if the evidence is positive, then that guarantees that you can move on to the next stage. But of course, if you view that there are some gaps still within that evaluation you did, then you can go ahead to say this training was not properly effective. Then you can know the exact individuals who will require like a retraining session for that particular training that happened. I hope that has answered your question.
Thank you. Thank you. We have Bukola Messi. You have the floor, Bukola, please. You can unmute.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you very much, Ma, for this interesting and insightful session. Okay, so my question basically is on, I've heard managers talk about, or let me say business owners talk about what's the return on investment if we embark on this, well, let me say, with regards to you bringing in subject matter experts like you have advised earlier, and then you get questions like, what are we getting in return? How soon are we getting the return on investment? So how do you measure this for you to be able to plan for ahead for other, learning and development initiatives in the organization? Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your question. So I'll point us to this bit of the presentation. I believe that many a times when business leaders are requesting for return on investment on the spot, that's because they don't believe that L&D initiatives will be effective. That's what I believe, in my opinion. So pointing us to this bit, if you remember when I shared in this slide, this presentation, tying the learning and development intervention to most of these sections where you have performance management and you see all the different initiatives there, as well as the value added. This value added could be something that you can use as a criteria to measure. It can be a measurement metrics for you, right? You can use this to say, oh, these are the ways I have been able to use through statistics, of course, ensure that there's been return on investment from this different aspect of the learning intervention. So that's typically what should happen, and to ensure and encourage the business leaders to have a proper buy-in to the learning and development approach. I hope that has answered your question.
Motola, please. Then we'll take Ogemdi. I hope I pronounce your name well.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for this session. It has been so exciting. So in my place of work, it's a manufacturing setting. We do training plan. We have ITF monitors our training. We're able to get our reimbursement on training. We also do what we call training effectiveness. So we do that after 6 months because of ISO audit. So now the issue comes here. The issue is, whenever we do training effectiveness, we list out the objectives of the training. We send it to the managers. We ask them, were these objectives, were they met? Has there been any impact? And most times what we got is, no, the objectives have not been met. So at times it always gives us issues on us to like, okay, what is going on? What is wrong? Because the manager keeps sending us the feedback that, okay, these objectives have not been met. And most times it's about maybe all these soft skills, leadership skills like that. So I don't know how we can maybe throw more light on that.
All right, thank you, Omotola, for your question. If you remember, I gave that feedback to someone that asked a similar question. So 2 things, right? I'll first of all touch on, I like the fact that you mentioned some of the trainings could be soft skills, which like leadership programs and all. For leadership development programs, they are not one-off trainings. It's an entire program. And measuring the effectiveness of that program, for instance, is not something that happens instantly. It can take so long. It can take 3 months, 6 months, or even up to a year, as the case may be, right? But it is not the primary responsibility of the learning and development officer, manager, or expert to solely do that measurement. It lies also on their supervisors, line managers at HOD. I know this is a very big challenge around organizations because it's not something that we have been used to. It's not something that is being done intentionally. But trust you me, that is the new narrative, because there's so much of learning and development that is embedded into performance. In fact, I can categorically state that the other name for L&D is performance development, because how you ensure that those developmental programs are tied to the performance of the employee is a primary responsibility of their line managers, who are the people they work with directly. So it's not a sole responsibility of the HR officer, HR generalist, or L&D to ensure that that training has been effective. In measuring it, it's a process. And many a times, most of those measurements is behavioral. It's done as a result of behavioral. So it should be properly documented, feedback conversation should also be had. And that's why it's also important that the line managers and heads of department themselves should be properly trained. They should be trained on how is expected of them to even relate with their team members, and more so evaluate the trainings and the learning intervention that has been given to their team members as well, so that accordingly they know how to get the required learning feedback from their team. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Ogemdi, please.
Okay.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Ogemdi. My question is, so my organization is currently undergoing restructuring.
Aida, it seems like we lost her.
I think our network.
Yes.
And, we're trying to put in. Okay, so one of the things we have.
Ogemdi, your network is breaking. It's going on and off. Okay. Maybe she'll try again or type out the question, because I sense she has a very important question to ask.
Yeah.
Bukola Mercy, your answer up again. Maybe it's a follow-up question or a new question. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you. So shortly, I just want to
In our plan
ask,
is to engage the line man.
Okay, the
Right,
network has
Bukola.
run out. Go ahead.
Yes.
okay,
Maybe she's
yes,
abroad. You know, we in Nigeria, our
I'm
network
so
is.
sorry. I'm in Nigeria. I just had a call came in, so interrupted my network.
Okay.
I'm in Nigeria. I've not gone out yet. So, where was I? Yes. So they didn't approve the needs analysis. So we had to use the competency framework and the recent appraisals in trying to build that training plan. My question now is, while we engage the line managers, right, where as they identify what these skills gaps are, how do we, or where do we go for resources? So if they say a skills gap is in data analysis, and the way our training plan is in level 1, 2, 3, and 4. So level 1 being foundation, 2 immediate, and things like that. So there's a progression to your learning. As you go higher, there is a degree of proficiency that is increased. So where do we get these resources? Resources in terms of courses, resources in terms of in-person training, resources in terms of instructor-led trainings and things like that. Like, where do we find this information, please?
Locally, I mean, I'm sure you have answer for that better than I do.
Except you recast that question, something drew my attention here, since I'm not the facilitator.
Okay, so if I'm to summarize, she's just asking basically where we get learning resources, especially for categories of employees that move from basic, intermediate, and advanced in their learning journey. Because when they have designed their learning calendar, they would have factored all of that in, and the fact that the company is going through a restructuring. I remember hearing that before the network threw her out. Please confirm I got the question correctly.
Very correct.
Okay.
What kind of resources is she looking for? Because that's one of the reasons why you have training vendors.
Yes, exactly. And online resources. You can leverage on LinkedIn, Udemy, they are free of them.
Yeah,
You can get
Coursera, LMS.
Coursera, yes.
And you can also work with your different HODs or senior managers. You can have your own internal academy.
Yeah.
And then do like a train the trainer type thing. And,
yes,
come up with curriculums, contents. So people who are proficient and prolific on the job may also be able to, some may be able to create content and not do the training. Some may be able to do both the content and also facilitate, or someone else
Exactly.
does the content, someone else does the facilitation, that kind of thing, or also leverage on vendors so that they eat small. Thank you. I think we take Bukola, Mercy, and Omorui. Then we'll go back to the chat and take any mop up any questions that are standing in the chat, and we close.
All right. Thank you, sir. So I think I have like two questions. First of all, you mentioned just a few minutes ago that you can have we can have like an in-house training academy. I recently experienced a line manager that has been asking for training opportunities, and then the management kept ignoring. So he had to train himself. And so when he started performing, the management and the HR director were like, okay, you know what, you have to train the team. But then he refused. He said, if we need him to train the team, then we have to pay for it because he actually invested in himself. So I'm like, what should we do in such a situation? Now, the second question I have now. Hello, sir.
Pay for it.
Hey, simple.
Hey, or go out and get it cheaper if you can. At least
I'm sorry, I lost you, sir. I didn't hear that.
You have evidence that he got trained with his own time and resources.
Yeah.
So you cannot extract that from him for free or just
Yeah.
because he's an employee. So pay. If you pay him to deliver the training, it will still be cheaper for you than to go and meet any external vendor. Just so you know, most of the places I have worked, when we do internal resourcing where our staff facilitate, we give them honorarium. So we have an amount we pay per hour to our internal facilitator. So when we tell people to come, and you can say, if Olama is your staff now, you now say, Olama, come and train us. She can begin to say, I'm not available, my workload, but if you give her something reasonable, she will even be the one to say, HR, when is the next training?
True.
Yeah. Go on, Bukola, please. Sorry, I interrupted.
Oh, that's interesting. So thank you, sir. All right. So as a result of that, the management has now started considering, training employees. But recently, one of my team members was nominated for a training outside the office. He has even begun the training, like I think about a month now, only for the COO to approach me to say that, you know what, you have to prepare a training bond for this guy. He's not supposed to leave the organization for the next 2 years. And I'm like, we are just facing out of one insult that we got, that an employee is saying that we have to pay him. And now that you guys are now considering training as an option, now you're asking employees to sign bond. So I want to know, what should I do in this regard?
Interesting. So regarding training bond, it's not something that is always encouraged in a lot of cases, because there have been so much stories around employees getting that money and paying off the training bond and still leaving your organization within a short period of time. So when you bond them in trying to keep them within the organization, it's not always effective. Dr. Oluyemi, I don't know if you agree with me on that.
So in this particular context, this specific context, please, I mean the context she has painted, this person has already started the training. I think it is unfair, unreasonable to introduce a bond. Now, if you are going to introduce a bond upfront, before you even paid for the training, before the employee commences the training, they will have known full awareness that this training is available, but it comes with a bond. These are the terms and conditions of the bond. They will now agree to it or not. But it becomes malicious when maybe I've done 1 month in the training. So if I say I'm not going to bond, is it that I will now stop the training? And you will, so it's messy. Is messy. So it's almost like you want to bond him under duress. In addition to what Olama also said, if you must bond, I don't want to my personal opinion, I will try not to bond. I advise people not to bond. But I agree that some investments can be massive. I'm not going to sit here. It's not all the training that is 25,000 naira or 100,000 naira. So I've seen some training 15 million, 10 million. Some will even involve someone going to maybe UK, US, and they will spend 3 months, all the per diem, that kind of thing, 20 million. But make sure that the bond is reasonable. So don't spend 5 million on somebody, for example, and bond the person for 20 million.
Mm.
So you need to be reasonable. Even if
Realistic.
you are tying it to dollar, tying it, let it
Yeah.
be reasonable so that if the matter ends up in court, they must see that it is a bond, a reasonable commercial bond, not
Yeah.
slavery or enslavement. We just need to put that out there and let people know upfront. But ultimately, treat people well so that they don't have to go, or when they go and come back to you, they have to cascade the knowledge, the knowledge transfer, train other people. Because it is when you train only one person, you think that one person has gone, especially if they go to a competition. So find a way, 1 to 2 years, how they distribute this knowledge, and so on and so forth, and treat people well too, so that they don't have to go. Although sometimes it is that training that makes them so valuable, and competition that is not willing to, what do you call it now, invest. They want to come and buy. They don't
Yeah.
want to bake the bread. They want to buy the loaf. Thank you. Olama, I'm just helping your ministry.
That's very correct. You shared my mind as well. I am not for bonding.
Amoruyi, please, final voice contribution or question. Then we just go to the chat and ensure we've not missed anything else.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, our teacher, for the wonderful work you're doing. I joined this call late. Mine is a question, and I just want to ask, what training and can you recommend for an L&D person? What training? What particular training can you recommend?
All right, so thank you for your question. I would like to know if, you said you joined late, so I don't know if you listened to the part when I talked about the L&D experts. Who are your L&D experts? Who are the L&D professionals? What is their role, right? Among the L&D professionals and experts, there are several roles. Are they training coordinators? Are they content developers? Are they facilitators? Are they instructional designers? You need to, first of all, define the role. You haven't defined the role, then you know the training you need to give to them. Most L&D professionals, not all L&D professionals want to be facilitators. Some are good in training coordination, not all of them want to facilitate. So it depends on what role that L&D person is occupying within your organization. Then you know the training to give them. But like I mentioned, L&D professionals are supposed to have all of these details I shared embedded into what it is they do. L&D professionals are instructional designers, facilitators, training coordinators, learning and as well as learning experts. So the trainings should be centered around that. They should also get trainings as train the trainers. If you are having them deliver trainings where it's required for them to have people within the organization train their team members within a smaller units, they could also get trainings on that. So there are several trainings, and of course, several other soft skill trainings, which would include something like effective communication, effective training delivery, and all. So there's so many trainings that are required for them, both soft skill and technical. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, but now you shed more light. Now, what I was actually asking, a training that would be all encompassing if possible.
There's no one training that is all encompassing, Oga.
So just check with all the training providers, check their brochure, check their websites, and on the go. For example, if you check Oluyemi Adeosun YouTube, this one is free, you are not paid. We have at least 12 trainings on L&D. including the one of today, if you sit with that, that's already 12 hours just to start with. But any major training provider in Nigeria or abroad, check their offerings. You will see the one that tickles your fancy. Hopefully your budget can accommodate it. All right. Thank you so much. We are taking some questions here on the chat box. Now, let's take this one from Michael Olama. I like the question. It says here that when there is no much change in the behavior of workers after work ethics training, is it enough for the business leader to reject further work ethics intervention?
Okay, I was also on that question. I found it interesting as well. So that should be the question around to respond to that would be, what was the approach that was used in the training? Was it a classroom approach? Was it very practical? Did you ensure that there were real life scenarios? Because how were you able to say that there was no changes after that training has happened, right? Work ethics aligns more towards behavior. So for you to be able to evaluate behavioral changes, again, it's not something that happens instantly. Some of the behaviors we have built ourselves as individuals has happened over time, that's happened over the years. Some of them has been as a result of our background, how we grew up, where we schooled and all of that. So expecting that work ethics training should give an intervention or to translate into a spontaneous behavior shouldn't be. So we need to be able to understand, when was the training delivered? How long has it been between when the training was delivered and when you have identified that there has not been any changes? What was the approach you used in delivering the training? And the participants, how did they take in the training? What were the feedbacks that you got instantly from the training that was delivered? So these are questions that needs to be answered before we will know whether or not it's okay for the business leader to reject any further training on work ethics.
Okay, so let me just chime in here. Again, training is not a silver bullet or a magic bullet.
Yeah.
And is not also a solo bullet. You see, HR generally, you have complementary solutions. What do I mean? In addition to that training, work ethics training or intervention, whatever you call it, then there's also your consequence management. How do you incentivize good behavior and how do you sanction bad behavior? On a lighter but serious note, sometimes if you take maybe 5 of your cashiers, you take them on a walking tour of Kirikiri prison during work hours. Just take them around, let them interview like 5 people who are there because they stole company money. It add it to that the training, you understand? It will reset. You see that appreciation of that Kirikiri maximum prison. We reset their brain.
Yeah.
Then, much more importantly, after that training session, the first person that does any, for example, that is a gross misconduct, run them through disciplinary process quickly and sack them. Not only should you sack them, charge them to court. Are we recording this? Okay, we are. But let me tell you what some people have done in the past. By the time they are reporting to the police, they will report it like 3 or 4 in the evening on Friday. Before you will get bail, it's Monday morning. So let people know that they shouldn't try rubbish with your organization. So they are not going to lose only their jobs if they are found wanting. That you don't mind if you take 10 years in court, you will prosecute it to the later. Do you understand? Those kind of reality helps. Let's be honest. A thief is a thief. Send the thief to Harvard to go and learn ethics. He will learn how to even steal better, even though that's not the intent. You know, thieves sometimes they think they have invisibility, that they are sharp, they won't catch them. But what you just want is that for people who genuinely are innocent, or what's the word now? ignorant. You want to make sure that they understand the company policies, the processes, and also improve your MECA checker. Don't let maybe one person be able to do anything end to end, and then maybe siphon business money. Improve your automation, your spot check, and so on and so forth. All right. I think between the two of us, we'll be able to add one or two value, but don't stop, please. Don't stop. It's like you say you want to gain weight and you have been eating and you not gain weight. Should you stop eating? You will know that the food you have been eating that didn't allow you to gain weight. If you now stop eating, you will know that you can lose weight. So translate it to training too. The training that looks like it's not working, you will now see that things can diminish or depreciate. I hope you got that inside there. Ngozi asked a question right after Michael, and she says that what LMS can you recommend to track completion of those mandatory trainings as employee progress? So on this particular platform, we will not want to mention any LMS. What we will say is that normally any standard LMS should be able to do this for you. The only thing is maybe your existing vendor, just tell them to do a demo for you. So depending on the ERP you are using, if you don't have LMS as part of it, you can activate. And if you are open, look, it's good to get a recommendation. I don't have any issues with that. But invite like 5 of them to come and do demo, including the recommendations you get from your friends and colleagues. Ask questions, let them do it to you. Then, based on your budget, okay, you can be able to make up your mind. For most LMS and other ERPs, even if you can't do something, but you want it, the developer may be able to do like an add-on or an extension or customize for you. Because if you can think it, a developer can conceptualize it. Just give them a few more days or weeks. I want to be sure that we've not missed out any question.
Yeah, I'm checking.
Thanks.
I think that's all.
Yes. All right. So I would like to personally appreciate Olamma. This is about our second or third session. I remember a particular book session she did. It's still very memorable. I'm looking forward to our next presentation, either a book session or a training like this, or the two. We are always happy to have you any day, anytime. You know how we do it. At this intersection, I would like to unmute everybody so that we can express our appreciation to our facilitator, our L&D experts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the class.
Thank you very much, Olamma, for your session.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so
Thank you very
much.
much for
Thank you
wonderful
for sharing all of those insights.
God bless you.
Thank you so
God bless
much.
you.
Thank you so much, Olamma. God bless you.
Thank